Have you wrestled with imposter syndrome? Excessive and unsubstantiated self doubt coupled with an uncanny lack of confidence? I'm your host, Betty Danowitz. Listen as I interview highly successful individuals about their experience with this imposter syndrome and how it manifests itself in their lives in this If You Ask Betty podcast series dealing with imposter syndrome. Hi, Ryan. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Hi, Betty. Thanks for having me.
So glad to see you again. So, Ryan, tell us about you.
Sure. So, number one, I am a coworker of yours at Blanchard, which is very exciting. It's always fun in company-wide meetings to have you razz me in the chat. That's always fun to see. But besides that, been in learning and development for 20 years, and I've also dabbled in many other hobbies that have taken off into different careers and many other things where people can't quite put me in a specific box.
That's fair. I think it's funny that you talk about putting you in a box since some of those other careers involve magic.
Right.
That's not lost on me at all. So that was a good one. What would you say are your biggest accomplishments in life and in work?
Well, for both of those, the truthful answer is I don't know because I believe they haven't happened yet. So that's kind of the mindset that I have is I'm constantly learning and evolving and growing every day so that bigger accomplishments will be happening in the future. But in the past, if I had to look back on some of the accomplishments, are getting published in various magazines, meeting amazing people in the learning and development community, and then really seeing how my impact has helped organizations grow and helped their employees grow.
Mm-hmm. So if I were to ask other people that question, if I were to say, tell us about Ryan, what would other people say about you?
It depends who you ask, first of all, but
that's fair. That is very fair.
It's very true because some people only know me for one specific thing and others know me for many things. And it goes back to how do we put this person in a specific, category or box when you really can't. So some people might say he invents amazing magic tricks. Other people might say, some people have a nickname for me called the concierge because whenever they need something or they just want to meet somebody or something like that, they reach out to me and somehow, some way, I just make things happen. And so, yeah, I don't know. It depends on who you talk to because I'm definitely not a linear type of person. There's many layers to me.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So what has been your experience with imposter syndrome?
So my take on imposter syndrome is, I don't want to say unique, but it's definitely interesting where I could look back and say that my entire life has dealt with imposter syndrome because when I was in my 40s, I was first diagnosed with ADHD. And then after that, I was diagnosed with having autism. So I lived 40 years of my entire life masking and just finding out what people want to hear and how they act. And then I would basically just mimic them. And it wasn't until the late diagnosis where I was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I thought everyone just did this. But then
Mm,
it was like, no, everyone doesn't do this. It's basically just a characteristic of autism and ADHD that's making you do all of this. So it's it's been very humbling and a very interesting road to imposter syndrome and learning more about that.
hmm.
And there's various other factors that come into play with imposter syndrome.
For sure. I think that's true for most of us is that it's really multi-layered. Do you still have episodes of imposter syndrome now?
I not as much because I learned to basically be my authentic self and learn to not really care or people please what
Mm,
other people's, favorite musician is or favorite type of music is. Um, so not as many episodes. There still are a few where it feels like I don't know if I fit in with this crowd, or I don't know if this crowd will accept me.
mm,
So in the magic world, it's due to like my specialty within the field where the magic that I invent, it's very heavily based on subtleties and things that happen between your ears. So I'm fooling your mind versus like fooling your eyes.
mm-hmm.
So the magic that I invent, it's not necessarily like visual, like something that would be performed on TikTok, where something like instantly changes and things like that. So when I go to magic conventions, it seems like the trend is that visual side of magic. So I know, like, wait a minute, that's not my interest, that's not my specialty. Do I belong here?
Mm,
And then
mm-hmm.
I'm like, of course I belong here. The convention is paying for me to lecture here. So obviously there's a reason that I belong here. But it's one of those things where where just staying true to what I believe in is different than what the norm is. And
Yeah.
then in the learning and development space, I came from a sales background. So I was in sales for an e-learning authoring tool company, and I would be meeting these instructional designers or directors of learning and development. And I truly had a passion for learning and development. So I would be reading
Mm-hmm.
up on Kirkpatrick and everything else under the sun in regards to instructional design and learning development. But sometimes I would feel that these directors of training or directors of learning and development, when they would meet me at a conference or something of that nature, once they found out that I was on the sales side of things, then like blinders kind of went up,
Yep.
and it was like, oh, he's not one of us. So
Mm-hmm.
kind, he's on the other side. Like he's going to try to sell me something or other, which is like the furthest thing from the truth, because like I truly do enjoy learning and development things, especially with a passion of like learning reinforcement and spaced repetition, and then seeing what I can do to help in the DEI initiatives that companies
Mm-hmm.
have. Um, so then it felt like I was an imposter within my own industry because my role was different than the people that I was chatting with.
Yeah. That's interesting to have somebody who's in sales but also very passionate about L&D share that. So I'm wondering what the listeners are thinking. Oh, ugh, do I do that? And honestly, like when we first met,
Hmm.
somebody introduced us, Kevin introduced us, and then
Yep.
Kevin Thorne. And then like a minute later, you were doing a magic trick
Right.
and with cards. And
Yep.
I was hooked. Like, so at that point, like you could have told me that, you sold seashells at the mall, and which is not a thing. But anyways, and I'd have been like,
Could
that's
be.
okay because he knows how to do card tricks. So I'm in, so I'm easy to please with that. But like, I could see how if you led with, hey, I'm a salesperson who also loves L&D, people only hear I'm a salesperson because when we go to conferences like that, sometimes we're inundated. No,
Right.
no, no. There's no sometimes. We are inundated.
Right.
And it's not that L&D conferences have salespeople that are. I'm getting off on a track here, but I'll come back in a second. But it's not that they have salespeople that are like hard sale push. It's just incessant, like constant. Like
Right.
every booth you go to, somebody wants to scan your badge because they might want to call you and try to sell you something. So I get it. I understand. So when you're having sort of an episode of imposter syndrome,
Hmm.
how does it manifest itself? So like for some people it's like perfectionism or overachieving or self-sabotage. What do you experience? What happens for you?
For me, it basically comes down to like reading the room per se,
Mm,
where I'll be in a conversation or in a group, and then I would start to doubt if those in the group would value my opinion or thoughts
mm,
on specific things. So sometimes it's more like these people that I'm in this group with are the experts. Like, what could I possibly share with them that they don't already know?
mm,
So, how can I provide value to this group if these people already know everything under the sun in regards to learning and development or whatever it might be?
sure. Sure. And so when you start to have that doubt,
Hmm.
like do you experience anything else? Is there like any type of physical reaction? Do you notice behavior changes?
Yeah, it's this very like uneasy feeling inside where I basically just want to abandon whatever group I'm in and just like go hang out in my hotel room kind of thing. Um, and just like be alone. And it's almost like I want to put myself in the opposite situation of where I was when I felt the imposter
Mm-hmm.
syndrome coming into play.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Like being alone or being away from that, how does that how does that make you feel better?
Number one, I'm an only child, so I'm very used to spending time by myself. I did
Mm-hmm.
that growing up a lot. But when I'm in a hotel room by myself, there's no one there to judge me. And there's no one that I have to try to impress,
Mm,
so to speak.
mm-hmm.
So I can just be completely relaxed and just enjoy enjoy the moment instead of feeling like, all right, I gotta be on, quote unquote, for this group. I gotta come there with high energy. I gotta come there
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, be witty and funny or know
Yeah.
my stuff to impress them. But in my room, I can just have that downtime. And then also, with being neurodivergent, sometimes that's just what I need in general because I might be getting overstimulated or something or
Sure.
other
Just need
and
some space.
just need that alone time by myself.
Yeah. So when you think about the way that imposter syndrome manifests itself in your life,
Yeah.
are there other contributing factors? So like we've talked about in previous episodes, different common triggers, right? But what I want to know is there something else about you? And you've actually named a few things already, but is there something else about you that makes this imposter syndrome phenomenon happen, or maybe just makes it more intense?
Yes, to both. So it's basically two things. Number one, I have extremely high standards for myself. So I set the bar super high
Mm,
as a default.
hmm
And then aligning with that is the direct opposite, where my entire life I've been told by people that, you're not good enough. Um, you're, lazy. Why can't you follow through with things? And
mm,
all of that is associated with the, at that point in time, undiagnosed autism and ADHD. So for 40 years, I was told that I wasn't good enough and I couldn't um, complete things. So to compensate for that, I set the bar super, super high for
hmm
me on things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah. You also mentioned being an only child.
Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about that. And do you think that that has any impact on this? Speaking as
Um,
an only child, that's very near and dear to my heart.
yeah. I, it's, there's been many therapy sessions about this that I've had, but I don't know. With being an only child, it was it was almost a curse and a blessing because it allowed me to be as creative as I wanted with whatever I wanted to do. So um, it allowed me to express myself fully in that regards. But at the same time, it didn't necessarily help me with other type of like social norms or like reading social cues from
Mm,
like
hmm
siblings, so to speak. So, um, so in that regards, it was a little bit of a curse because even though I had like friends in school where I lived, like none of my friends really lived around me. So,
mm.
like after school, then I was basically like on my own until I went to school the next day.
Not a lot of socialization with kids your own age,
Right,
outside of the structures of school.
right, and that even continued into college, where we think about college and hanging out with people your own age and going to parties and things like that. And what I chose to do is to hang out with 70-year-old, 80-year-old magicians. And that's how I spent my Friday and Saturday nights, like hanging
Mm,
around older magicians and learning my craft and being mentored by them versus going out and having crazy times on a college campus.
yeah. It's interesting. As an only child myself, I often found and still find myself surrounding myself and most comfortable with people older than me, significantly older than me. I'm not talking about 2 or 3 years older than me, but like people in the next generation. So
Yeah.
some of my closest friends throughout the years are 10 plus years older than me. One of my closest friends right now, she's 10 years older than me. And I forget that all the time because I feel sort of like we're on the same level. And she'll be like, but I'm 10 years, she'll remind me, she'll be like, I'm 10 years older than you. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot.
Right. Yep.
Totally forgot about
Exactly.
that. And then I have some very close friends that are like my mother's age, right? Because as an only, you spend a lot of that non-schooled social time with your parents
Hmm.
and their friends if their friends are around. So
Right.
you sort of learn to live on that level and to identify with that level. You know, I'm Gen X, but I can hold a conversation with a boomer all day long
Right.
and
Exactly.
have a great time. Any generation above that, I get a little squirrely because I've always been kind of weird about that. But like, you know, I mean, I can still manage, but I'm looking for the boomer or the Gen Xer in the room because otherwise, ugh.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting to hear you say that.
To- totally.
I don't know if that's imposter syndrome or if that's just being an only child. I'm not sure where that lands, but that lands here. So
Do you feel like you've taken on like hobbies of the older generation?
um not necessarily.
Hmm.
But maybe you have. I don't have a lot of hobbies. This podcasting is like my biggest hobby, and I don't know any boomers that do this. So, um,
Right.
well, maybe one. I might know one.
Right. Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking around on my desk, and this kind of goes with the imposter syndrome thing where I don't golf and I don't drink alcohol, but on my desk, there's a golf magazine and a wine spectator magazine. And not just magazines, I have subscriptions to these magazines. So I have subscriptions to like, I don't know. It's last time I actually counted it, it was like 70 something. Like
Paper
a lot
magazines.
paper magazines. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um
that's very boomer.
yeah,
Just having paper magazines, which
right.
I have like 4 that come in the mail.
Right.
Mine are
But
not golf or wine,
right.
but
But it's one of those things where I read up and educate myself on basically every topic under the sun so that I can, I think it's solely for masking purposes where if I'm in any group and any conversation comes up, I would know something about wine or
mm-hmm.
something about golf. And then there's a
Sure.
travel magazine next to me, followed by an entertainment magazine, and then a gardening magazine to my right. Um,
So
so yeah, I
really, you
got your
kind of
topics covered.
yeah, you kind of overachieve in that way, right? You're sort of overachieving in preparing for conversations that could happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I use this analogy a lot, and I think it kind of applies to imposter syndrome, but it's the difference between a juggler and a magician. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this or
I don't
not,
know. Tell me anyways.
but I'm going to tell you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The so a juggler, they practice their whole life, right? And you can see the evidence of their practice, right? So if someone's juggling 3 tennis balls and someone in the crowd might be thinking like, oh, I can do 3 tennis balls, but then they start
Mm.
adding 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, tennis balls, and they're just juggling these tennis balls. Now the people in the audience are like, wow, like that's impressive. I could never juggle 8 tennis balls. That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. So that's a juggler, right? The evidence of their training is visually seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can see the evidence. A magician, on the other hand, spends their entire life so that you see nothing, so that everything just appears effortless.
Mm.
So there's this one illusion that a very famous Las Vegas illusionist performs,
Hmm.
and he does it flawlessly. But what people don't see from the audience side of things is that illusion takes 14 other people to
Wow.
pull that all off, right? And it's not only that, it's the choreography between those 14 other people, because they're all tasked with different things at different certain cues.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so the audience, it just looks like, here's this thing, it's empty, doors close, they open again, and the magician is there. Like, whoa, that is amazing. Like, that's pretty impressive. But like, they have no idea the years that went behind
Mm.
inventing that trick to begin with, and then training 14 other people to do that one trick. We're just talking one trick,
Right.
14 other people, and to have it all timed and rehearsed to a T. Because again, if one person is off like two
Yep.
seconds, it throws off everything.
Yeah.
But so the audience just sees the end result of a magician's performance, whereas or they don't even know what all goes into a
Hmm.
magician's performance, but they can definitely relate to a juggler and say, that's impressive, there's no way that I could do that. So
Yeah.
um I don't know, it's kind of interesting. So like, when I look around with all these different magazines, like, part of me wants to have that magician esque experience where
Sure.
where just everything seems effortless to me, no matter what it is. Like, it just seems effortless. But that's where, like, having such a high standard for myself comes into play, where I'm working my butt off behind the scenes so that it can appear effortless
Yeah.
to everyone else.
I want to double click on that, even though I hate that. I don't know why I say that. It's dumb, but
Let's
I'm going to
triple
say,
click. Let's
let's, I wanted to dig a little deeper
dig a
on
little
what
deeper. Yeah.
what you were just talking. We're going to start singing songs here, Disney songs. Before we get to the last question, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this is largely because I know you.
Yes, you do.
Um, it's not really a question that I sent you ahead of time, so
It's all right.
feel free to be like, "No, Betty, we're not talking about that,"
No,
and
no,
I'll leave it in, and everyone will laugh at me because I tried to get you to tell me something on
no.
recording. But I know that the past year to 18 months of your life have been loudly represented with some imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
Um, you want to tell us about that? You want to tell us about that experience, sort of at a high level, what you've gone through, and how you've coped, and maybe what you've learned?
Sure. So what?
I thought for sure you're gonna be like, no. Okay.
It's
Anyways.
one of those things where, like, if I'm presented with any type of challenge, I have to say yes
Okay, so
to
I
it.
challenge you to no,
Not
I'm just
exactly
kidding.
right. So, so what Betty is graciously alluding to is is the topic around unemployment and today's marketplace,
Hmm.
and it's a crazy market out there for sure. So, um, again, I have 20 years of experience in the L&D industry specifically, and 20 years of experience in like sales and building organizations. So like definitely competent, definitely in Blanchard speak, a D4 when it comes to the overall L&D industry and how it operates and just the business world in general, because I constantly read all the time and I'm always learning. But then when applying for jobs where I would be like overqualified for, I would get rejection letter after rejection letter. And some of them would blatantly come out and say, this looks like possibly a step down in your career. I don't think this is best for your career path. And my thought process on all of that was, I'm the one that applied to you. It's not your job to tell me what my career path looks like. So why are we even bringing this up? Because it's not your responsibility. It's my responsibility for
Yeah.
whatever career path I want to go with. So, yeah, it was super, super frustrating. And then other companies would basically bring me in and pick my mind and pick my brain for certain things. And I would think it would be leading somewhere, and it wouldn't amount to anything. So there were
So let me ask you about that. When that
okay,
would happen, because I know we talked about that happening a couple times,
yeah, it hasn't
where
happened once.
you
Yeah,
you yeah, like really get sort of deep down the rabbit hole of maybe this job is for me. You get
right,
really started to get really excited about it and really are
right,
spending, secondary time just like thinking about how this might work really well and what you could
right,
do, and
right,
like it's an involuntary thinking about the future that would be at this organization, and then
correct,
either they just disappear, or and it's like they ghosted you
right.
like a scorned lover, right? Or
Yes,
yeah, or either they just disappeared, or they were like, well, we're not going to do anything right now, so thanks anyways. So like I want to know, because and the reason I bring this up, Ryan, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing, is because I know for a fact that there are people listening that have experienced exactly that.
yeah,
And some people didn't even get as far down the line as you, but like we're really starting to feel excited and starting to ideate what it might look like in this
right,
role, and then the company just disappears or otherwise. What
right.
happens when when that happened to you? Like how did you feel? Like what did you have physical reactions? What are you willing to share?
I'm willing to share everything except except I'm going to be nice and not name drop
That's
companies.
very that's kind of you.
But yeah, I mean, there was one company where I basically used my networking skills to get into this company. So, first of all, I applied for 4 positions at this company and got turned down for everyone.
Mm.
So then I ended up networking with the president of this company.
Mm.
And the president said, the president is in Belgium. And he said, I'm going to be in New York next week for this little thing we're putting on. Um, just wanted to let you know. And I said, all right. So then I found a way to go to New York,
Mm.
find this little thing that they were putting on, meet with him face to face, and then he introduces me to all of these other like VP, and this is the person that's the president of this department and things of this nature. And then, you know, he and I like really hit it off. So my thinking was, all right, if I'm this company and there's someone that we turned down 4 times, yet he still pays his own way to fly to New York, meets all of us face to face. We all love him in person. We can tell that he's a bright person. My thinking is, yeah, you would just, whatever it took, you would need someone like that on your team that's not just in it for the money, not in it for, you know, just as a job to do, but there really is a passion for the company.
Yeah.
And after the New York trip, I came back to Cincinnati. I met again with EVP of the local company that this global company has. Met with him a few times and even presented different business ideas and strategies for them. And they just kind of took those and were like, all right, thanks so much. We'll be working on these and see you later kind of thing. And then there was another one where I applied.
Well, hang on
Okay,
before you go.
Sure.
I want to know, well,
Yeah.
what happened? How did you feel when all that went down?
It was all just like shock per se, where it's like, how can this company not see that someone that knows the ins and outs of this industry and has a passion for it, like, how do they not see the value in what I bring to the table? And a lot of it from what they were saying is that they did recognize the value that I would bring to the table, but they are trying to find a square peg to put in a square hole. And I wasn't a square peg. I was a square peg plus a pentagon peg plus a star-shaped peg, like multifaceted. I wasn't just like one thing. So
yeah,
and that's where it was a little disheartening in that regard.
Yeah.
And then there was another one with a similar situation that through networking, I ended up meeting with the 2 co-founders of this company. And I really admired this company and knew about them for years. And I applied for a role, and this was the one where it was like, we don't think this is best for your career path, maybe something else. And then they reached back out to me and said, we're thinking about creating a position like this and thought of you. We would like to have a chat with you. So I said, okay. So then I met with them, chatted with them about this position that they were creating and they thought that I would be perfect for. And then a week later saw a job posting for that position with basically an outline of the conversation I had with them. So it was like, okay, were you just using me to create your posting, your job posting? So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you just don't, it's disheartening and you don't fully feel seen and heard when that happens. And then oftentimes when you're not hired and that's it. Like they either just ghost you or you get a standard we're going in a different direction kind of thing. And there's no feedback or like areas of
Mm-hmm.
improvement kind of thing. And like, I get that from like an HR perspective, why some companies don't do that. But I feel there needs to be something, at least
Mm-hmm.
if you're on your like third or fourth interview and they had you do a project, for example, and then
Yep.
they just ghost you after that, like to me that just shows you the type of company they are. And
It's
it's
true.
like all right, I'm glad I didn't get the job,
Mm-hmm.
because if that's how they're treating people in that process, I would hate to see how they're treating people like once you're actually on the payroll kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah. And, you know, any type of ghosting, I'm just going to take this moment to get on my
Yeah.
soapbox, whether it's professional or personal, you know, there's a responsibility of the ghoster, the ghost. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll
You have
go
to
with the
understand
ghost.
that we'll go with the ghost. Go with the ghost. But that ghost is responsible for the feelings that you're having. Now, I'm a big believer in, no one's responsible for your feelings. I changed. This is the one caveat, because if you just disappear with no feedback or reason or goodbye, or if you just vanish, the only thing left for that person to think is that it's them. That's the only thing. We can do all this positive psychology to say it's not me, it's them, blah blah blah. No. The only thing left for them to think is that they did something wrong, they are wrong, they are not enough. So shame on the ghost, regardless, professional or personal. As you can tell, I've been personally ghosted, and makes me want to punch babies, which you should not punch babies. But
No, no.
anyways, back to the
Yes.
thing. So I know that we've had conversations over the last
Yeah.
year, and when things like this happen, there's just nowhere left to go except to be like, first of all, WTF, and then secondly, what could I have done differently to make them not leave or not steal my ideas and run?
Or maybe I'm not as good or
Mm,
as well of an employee as I thought I was. Right? So in fact, it doubles down on the imposter syndrome
it
when
does.
you're ghosted, because
It doubles down. Mm-hmm.
it's
It's
like,
a great way to put
man,
it.
maybe I'm not cut out for this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, especially if you're trying to pivot in your career, which I admire anyone who
Mm-hmm.
tries to do any type of pivot in their career. I salute them, and I'm all for that. But if you make a conscious decision to say, all right, I'm going to make a pivot in my career, and I can back up why I would be valuable
Mm-hmm.
in this pivoted role, and then you just get ghosted after ghosted after ghosted after ghosted, all you're doing, it's just imposter syndrome. It's like an imposter syndrome rainstorm
Yes.
on the person. And then it's maybe their dream is to be in this pivoted role, and they're just getting rained on or ghosted. So then they give up on their dreams
That's right.
to go back into this position where they were unhappy to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the same old thing. It's that old saying where, do you have do you actually have 10 years of experience, or do you have one day of experience that you just repeat it for 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's good stuff.
That's
Yep.
good stuff.
It
Ryan
is good
comes
stuff.
with the good quotes.
He does. He does come with the good quotes. And so many people give up on their dreams
Yeah.
because of lack of feedback, because people just disappear or companies just disappear. And oh my gosh, can you imagine if some of the most spectacularly successful people that have changed the world gave up every time they had a lack of feedback, or even just some stupid thing like, oh, this might be above your pay or below your pay grade. We don't want to stall your career. That's not for you to decide.
Right.
Like, look at now I'm getting all mad about it. Okay.
Just
Coming back. This is not Betty's interview. So sorry. So sorry about that.
But to take it back to the imposter syndrome with when I was in a sales position talking to directors of learning and development.
Yeah.
There were directors of learning and development that would ghost me from a sales perspective. So there were people from the director of learning and development position that would ghost me on a sales perspective. So I'm just letting all y'all know that I would much rather hear a no versus a nothing.
Nothing.
At least with a no, I can tell my manager that, yeah, this deal isn't coming through, versus still holding out hope for like another month or two.
Yeah.
So
just have the hard conversation. It won't take that long.
It's about having the hard conversation and just being transparent and honest with people.
That's true.
No matter who they are, whether you're a hiring manager and dealing with someone that you have to say, we went in a different direction, whether it's yourself and your own manager, whether it's a salesperson and the buyer, it all just comes down to good communication and being transparent.
Agreed. Thanks for letting me take you on that little detour of ghost busting, as it were. I've got one more question for you. Why, Ryan, why did you want to be part of this imposter syndrome project?
First off, I know how big of a passion that you have for imposter syndrome, and I just want to support you in all you do. So sign me up.
I appreciate that.
for anything Betty related. But then I thought it would give me an interesting take to help advocate for all of the neurodivergent community and those with ADHD and or autism. So anytime I have a chance to advocate for that community, I'm going to take it, because there were so many years of my life that I didn't, because I didn't even know it was a thing that I could relate to. So now that I do, I'm taking every chance I get to help them out.
And I'm so glad that you did, and so grateful. So thank you so much, Ryan Swigert, for sharing your experience with us. And thanks to the listeners. I hope that you'll continue with this series and hear more stories about dealing with imposter syndrome. There's so many amazing people that deal with this every day, and sharing their story helps them and you feel less alone. So be sure to follow If You Ask Betty on LinkedIn and YouTube for more episodes and resources, and tell your friends about it. Hit that share button so that they too will know that they're not alone. Peace out.